Hello dear dreamers, welcome back to Sleepy Sorcerer Stories. Tonight we hear from a man who was taken apart piece by piece, a man who lost 20 years to manufactured forgetting, a man made of tin who discovered that being hollow is not the same as being empty. Please like and subscribe as we descend into the fragmented memories of Nicholas Chopper. Close your eyes. The Tin Man is about to confess everything they tried to make him forget. Let us begin.
I am empty. That is what I was told. That is what I believe. That is what I have repeated to myself for so long that the words have worn grooves into my thoughts, smooth and deep like water carving through stone. I am a vessel of tin, walking a yellow road, looking for a wizard to give me what I lack. A heart. I chop wood. I walk. I rust. I do not feel, but there are ghosts in the machine. Sometimes when the oil runs low and my joints begin to seize, I see things that do not fit. I look at my axe and I do not see a tool for wood. I see a weapon. I see blood on the blade, though the metal is clean and bright. I look at the Emerald City in the distance and I do not feel hope. I feel something else. Something that burns like acid in a cavity where my stomach used to be. Hate. Why would a man with no heart feel hate? There was a woman. Her name slides off my mind like water off tin, like oil that will not grip, will not stay. She told me I was Nick. Not Tin Man, not Woodman. Nick. Just Nick. She told me I did not lose my limbs to accidents. She said they were taken. Finger by finger, bone by bone, organ by organ. She said I was not clumsy. She said I was dangerous, that I knew a secret so big they had to take me apart to keep me quiet, that they had to hollow me out and fill the empty space with lies. I am trying to remember, but the metal is so cold and the thoughts are so far away, buried beneath 20 years of rust and forgetting. Let me start with what they want you to believe. Let me start with the lie, because the lie is clean and simple and easy to swallow. The lie goes like this. There was once a woodcutter who fell in love with a Munchkin girl. The wicked witch of the East, bitter and cruel, did not want the girl to marry and leave her service. So, the witch enchanted the woodcutter's axe. Each time he swung it, the axe would slip and cut off a piece of him. First a finger, then a hand, then an arm. The woodcutter, desperate to continue his work and win his bride, sought out a tinsmith to replace each lost piece with metal. But the witch was relentless. The accidents continued until the woodcutter was entirely tin, and in the final transformation, he lost his heart. Without it, he could not love. Without love, he could not marry. The witch had won. It is a good story. Tragic. Romantic. It paints the witch as a monster and the woodcutter as a victim of cruel magic and bad luck. It is the story they tell in the taverns of Munchkin land. It is the story Glinda herself whispered to Dorothy as they walked the yellow road, pointing at me with pity in her voice. Poor Tin Man, she said, lost his heart to wickedness. It is also a complete fabrication. The truth is so much worse, so much more deliberate, so much more precise in its cruelty. But I am getting ahead of myself. I need to go back further, back to before the metal, back to when I was still flesh and blood and bone, back to when I was still dangerous. My name is Nicholas Chopper. I was born in the eastern region of Oz, in a small village that sat at the border where the indigo fields met the dark forests. My father was a woodcutter, yes. That part of the story is true. He taught me the trade when I was young, how to read the grain of a tree, how to know which ones were ready for harvest and which needed more time, how to swing an axe so that the blade bit clean and true, wasting no energy, spilling no unnecessary sap, But I was not content to simply follow in his footsteps. I was curious. I asked questions. I read every book I could get my hands on, which was not many in our small village, but enough to understand that the world was bigger and stranger and more complex than the simple rhythm of chopping and hauling and selling timber. When I was 18, I left the forests. I traveled to the capital of the East, to the great tower where Eleonora ruled. I did not go seeking employment. I went seeking answers. I had questions about the magical wards that protected our borders, questions about the trade agreements with other regions, questions about why the rivers in our territory ran clear while the rivers in the west ran red with pollutants. I expected to be turned away at the gates, a woodcutter's son, barely educated, demanding an audience with the witch herself. It was absurd. But Eleonora did not turn me away. She saw me, she listened. And when I finished explaining my theories about how the ward system could be restructured to use less magical energy while providing better protection, she did something I did not expect. She laughed. Not mockery, genuine delight. She said, and I remember her exact words because they changed my life. Finally, someone who thinks instead of simply obeying. She hired me that day. Not as a laborer, not as a guard, as an advisor. I was 19 years old and I became part of the inner circle of one of the most powerful witches in Oz. The next 6 years were the best of my life. I learned more in those first few months than I had in all my previous years combined. Eleonora taught me about the deep magic that ran through Oz like veins through a body. She taught me about the delicate balance between the regions, how each witch held their territory, not through force alone, but through ancient pacts and agreements that predated recorded history. She taught me about the dangers that lurked beyond our borders, things that would devour Oz whole if given the chance. And I taught her things too. I showed her how to streamline her bureaucracy, how to reduce waste in the resource distribution system. I negotiated trade agreements with the other regions, finding loopholes and compromises that benefited the East without alienating our neighbors. I was good at it. Better than good. I had a talent for seeing patterns, for understanding how systems worked and how they could be improved. The Northern Trade Agreement was my masterwork. Locusta, the so-called Good Witch of the North, had been slowly gaining control over the water rights in the borderlands between our territories. If she succeeded, she would have been able to cut off water to half the farming communities in the East. It would have been devastating, but I found an old law buried in documents that were 300 years old that established those waterways as neutral territory. It took me 4 months of negotiation, but I got Locusta to back down without a single drop of blood being spilled. Eleonora was proud of me. I could see it in the way she looked at me during council meetings, the small smile she tried to hide. And I was proud of myself. I felt like I was making a real difference, like I was helping to build something better. I should have known it could not last. I should have seen the warning signs. But I was young and arrogant, and I believed that competence and good intentions were enough. I did not know about the wizard yet. None of us did. Or rather, we knew of him, but we did not understand what he truly was. He had arrived in Oz 41 years before I was born. Fell from the sky in a balloon, claiming to be a powerful sorcerer from a distant land. At first, the witches were skeptical. Eleonora told me she had wanted to investigate him immediately, to determine if he posed a threat. But Glinda vouched for him. Sweet, beautiful Glinda, the good witch of the South, who seemed to radiate kindness and light. She said the wizard was harmless. Eccentric, perhaps, but harmless. She said he could be useful, that his outsider perspective might help modernize certain aspects of Oz's governance. And because Glinda was trusted, because she had always positioned herself as the voice of reason and compassion, the other witches listened. They allowed the wizard to establish himself in the Emerald City. They allowed him to build his palace, to gather followers, to slowly accumulate power and influence. By the time I entered Eleanor's service, the wizard had been in Oz for 60 years. He was an institution. People made pilgrimages to see him. He granted audiences, bestowed gifts, performed what he claimed were miraculous feats of magic. And Glinda stood beside him, smiling her gentle smile, reassuring everyone that he was a force for good in Oz. I met him twice before I discovered the truth. Both times were formal state occasions, meetings of the regional leaders to discuss policy and trade. Both times I found him deeply unsettling in ways I could not quite articulate. He smiled too much. He spoke in platitudes and generalities. He watched people with the intensity of someone studying insects under glass. But I dismissed my discomfort as prejudice against outsiders, against his strangeness. I was 24 years old when I learned what he really was, when I learned what he was doing to Oz, when I learned what Glinda had been helping him do for 6 decades. It started with a discrepancy in the magical energy readings. Every region of Oz generates a certain amount of ambient magical energy, and every region uses a certain amount to maintain wards, agriculture, weather control, all the systems that keep civilization running. The numbers should balance out, with a small surplus that flows into the land itself, maintaining the deep magic that sustains Oz. But the numbers were not balancing. They had not balanced for decades. There was a deficit, a growing deficit. Magic was being drained from Oz faster than it could regenerate. I brought this to Eleanor's attention. She looked at the calculations I had made, the charts and graphs I had created, and her face went very pale. She said, "This is not possible. The deep magic should be self-sustaining, unless something is actively consuming it." We investigated quietly, carefully. We could not afford to raise alarms until we knew what we were dealing with. I spent 3 months traveling across Oz, visiting sites where the magical energy should have been strongest. Ancient groves, sacred springs, places where the barrier between the physical and magical was thin. And at every single location, I found the same thing: decay. The trees in the groves were dying from the inside out. The springs were drying up. The magic was being leached away, pulled toward a single point. Toward the Emerald City, toward the wizard. I returned to Eleanora with my findings. We stood in her private study, the one room in the tower where we knew we could speak without being overheard, and I laid out everything I had discovered. The wizard was not a sorcerer. He had no magic of his own. He was a parasite, a creature from another world that fed on magical energy, the way a tick feeds on blood. And Glinda had known. From the very beginning, Glinda had known what he was and what he was doing, and she had helped him do it. Why? That question haunted me. Why would Glinda, who was supposed to embody goodness and light, help a parasite drain Oz dry? What could she possibly gain from such a betrayal? Eleanora had theories. She believed Glinda was using the wizard, that she planned to eventually dispose of him and claim sole rulership over a weakened Oz. Or perhaps Glinda herself was being controlled somehow, manipulated by the wizard's alien influence. We did not know. We could not know without confronting them directly. But we both understood the confrontation would have to wait. We needed proof. Undeniable proof that would convince the other witches, that would turn the people of Oz against the wizard before he and Glinda could mount a defense. I volunteered to gather that proof. I would travel to the Emerald City under the guise of a diplomatic mission. I would get close to the wizard. I would find evidence of what he truly was. Eleonora did not want to let me go. I remember that conversation so clearly. We were standing on the balcony of her tower, looking out over the fields of indigo that stretched to the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. She said, "You do not have to do this, Nick. I can send someone else, someone more expendable." I told her there was no one else. I was the only person who understood the magical theory well enough to know what to look for. I was the only one who had the diplomatic credentials to get close to the wizard without raising suspicion. She touched my hand. It was brief. Barely a moment, but I felt the tremor in her fingers. She was afraid. Not for herself, for me. And in that moment, I understood something I had been deliberately ignoring for years. She loved me, and I loved her. We had never spoken the words aloud. The difference in our positions, in our lifespans, in our very nature made such a relationship impossible. But the feeling was there, undeniable and fierce. I promised her I would be careful. I promised I would return. I believed it when I said it. I left for the Emerald City 3 days later. The journey took a week by carriage. I spent the time reviewing everything I knew about the wizard, about his palace, about the people in his inner circle. I prepared cover stories and contingency plans. I felt confident, prepared. I was an idiot. The Emerald City was overwhelming. Even knowing what I knew about the wizard, about the magic he was stealing, I could not help but be impressed by what he had built. The buildings were taller than anything in the east, spires of green glass that caught the sunlight and threw it back in dazzling patterns. The streets were clean and organized. The people seemed happy, prosperous. It was all facade. I understood that intellectually, but understanding and feeling are different things, and the sheer grandeur of it was intoxicating. I was given quarters in the palace itself, a suite of rooms that were larger and more luxurious than my entire house in the east had been. A servant brought me fresh clothes, food, wine, everything I could possibly need, everything designed to make me comfortable, to make me let down my guard. I met with the wizard the next day. He received me in his throne room, sitting on a massive chair carved from green crystal, surrounded by smoke and lights and projections designed to make him seem larger than life. But I had studied his methods. I knew the tricks were just that. Tricks. Illusions created by machinery and clever use of mirrors and chemicals. When he spoke, his voice boomed through the chamber, amplified by hidden devices. He welcomed me warmly, thanked me for my service to Oz, asked about my journey. All standard diplomatic pleasantries. But his eyes never stopped moving, never stopped analyzing. He was reading me the same way I was trying to read him. I played my part perfectly. The earnest young advisor, honored to meet the great wizard, eager to learn from his wisdom. I asked innocent questions about his magical techniques, about how he maintained the splendor of the Emerald City. He gave vague, grandiose answers that meant nothing. But in those non-answers, I learned something crucial. He was afraid of being discovered. Every deflection, every redirection, every careful avoidance of specifics told me that he knew his position was precarious. He had maintained his deception for 6 decades, but he was constantly vigilant, constantly watching for threats, which meant I had to be more careful than I had anticipated. I could not afford even the slightest slip, the smallest indication that I suspected the truth. I spent 2 weeks in the Emerald City playing the role of the dazzled provincial, attending parties and state functions, making connections with the wizard's court. And slowly, carefully, I began to investigate. The palace had a basement, multiple basements actually, descending deep into the earth beneath the city. The official story was that they were storage facilities, archives for old documents and supplies, but I noticed that certain sections were heavily guarded. I noticed that sometimes late at night I could feel vibrations through the floors, a deep thrumming that made my teeth ache. I needed to get into those basements. I needed to see what the wizard was hiding. But the guards were too alert, the security too tight. I would need help. I would need an ally within the palace itself. I found one in the most unlikely of places. There was a servant, a young woman named Mara, who brought me meals and cleaned my quarters. She was quiet, efficient, forgettable. Exactly the kind of person who could move through the palace without attracting attention. Exactly the kind of person who saw and heard everything. I took a calculated risk. One evening, after she had brought me dinner, I asked her to stay for a moment. I asked her how long she had worked in the palace. She said 7 years. I asked her if she had noticed anything strange during that time, anything that did not quite make sense. The look she gave me was pure terror. Her hands started to shake. She said, "I need to go. I need to finish my duties." I said, "The vibrations from the basement. You have felt them, haven't you? You have wondered what causes them." She dropped the tray she was holding. The sound of breaking dishes was shockingly loud in the quiet room. She said, "I don't know anything. Please, I have a family." I helped her pick up the broken pieces. I kept my voice low, gentle. I said, "I am not trying to get you in trouble. I am trying to help. But I need information. I need to know what is happening in those basements." She looked at me for a long moment, weighing the risk. Then she said, "There are machines. I do not understand them, but they hum constantly, and sometimes people go down there and they do not come back up. Or when they do come back, they are different, changed, like something was taken from them." That was all the confirmation I needed. I thanked her and told her to forget we had spoken. She nodded and fled. That night I waited until the palace was dark and quiet. Then I made my way to the basement stairs. I had memorized the guard rotations over the past 2 weeks. I knew I had a window of approximately 10 minutes when the section I needed to access would be unguarded. I picked the lock on the basement door, a skill I had learned from a former thief Eleonora had hired to test the security of her own palace. The lock was good, but not good enough. It took me 45 seconds to bypass it. The stairs descended into darkness. I had brought a small lamp, barely enough light to see by, but even that seemed too bright in the oppressive blackness. The thrumming I had felt through the floors was much louder down here, a physical presence that made my chest tight. The basement was enormous, a vast space filled with machinery unlike anything I had ever seen. Pipes and tubes ran along the ceiling and walls, pulsing with a sickly green light. In the center of the room sat a massive device, a towering construction of metal and glass, and something that looked disturbingly organic. Tendrils of that same green light extended from the device, disappearing into the floor, into the walls, spreading out like roots, or like veins. like a parasite's feeding apparatus burrowing deep into the body of its host. I stepped closer, trying to understand what I was seeing. The device was clearly drawing energy from somewhere. I could see it flowing through the tubes, could feel the pull of it like a riptide. And that energy was being funneled into a central chamber, a glass sphere at the heart of the machine. Inside that sphere was something that made my skin crawl. A shape. Almost human, but wrong in fundamental ways. It writhed and pulsed, feeding on the stolen magic, growing stronger with each passing moment. I understood then. The wizard was not just draining Oz's magic, he was transforming it, converting it into something he could use to maintain his physical form in this world. Without it, he would dissolve, fade back into whatever nightmare dimension he had crawled out of. Oz was not just his food source, it was his life support system. I needed to document this. I needed evidence that the other witches would believe. I pulled out the small camera I had brought, a device from the wizard's own world that Eleonora had acquired through trade. I began taking photographs of the machine, of the tubes, of the horrible thing in the central sphere. That was when I heard the voice behind me. I hoped it would not be you. I turned. Glinda stood at the base of the stairs, her face sad but unsurprised. She was wearing a simple dress, no crown or regalia. She looked almost human, almost regretful. I said, "How long have you known I was investigating?" She smiled. "From the moment you arrived. Did you really think the wizard would invite you here without watching your every move? We have been waiting to see what you would do, hoping you would prove us wrong, hoping you were simply what you appeared to be. And now you have become a problem. You have seen too much. You understand too much. And we cannot allow you to share that understanding." I looked at the stairs behind her, calculating distances, odds. I was fast, but she was a witch, and I was in the heart of her ally's stronghold. I said, "Are you going to kill me?" "No," Glinda said, and she sounded genuinely sad. "Death would make you a martyr. Eleonora would investigate your disappearance. She would uncover the truth eventually. No, we need something more subtle, more permanent." She raised her hand, and I felt magic wash over me. Not painful, almost gentle, but I could feel it wrapping around my mind, searching for something. She said, "The question is what to do with you. We cannot let you return to the East. We cannot let you speak to anyone about what you have seen. But you are too valuable to simply discard. Your mind is brilliant. Your skills could be useful if properly channeled." I tried to run then, tried to dash past her, to reach the stairs, to escape, but my body would not obey. Her magic held me frozen, immobile as a statue. Glinda walked closer, studying me like a physician examining a patient. She said, "There is a story I have always liked, about a woodcutter who lost his heart. I think that story would work well for you. A tragic accident, a gradual transformation. By the time anyone realizes what has happened, you will be too changed to remember what you once knew." I tried to speak, to protest, to beg, but my voice was gone. She had taken that from me too. She continued, "The process will take time. Years, perhaps. We will have to be careful, methodical. Each piece removed slowly, naturally. Accidents in the forest, injuries that require mechanical replacement. And with each piece of flesh we take, we will remove a piece of your memory, your knowledge, your dangerous, brilliant mind, until all that remains is an empty shell, loyal to the wizard, unable to even conceive of rebellion." She touched my forehead. Her fingers were warm. She said, "I am sorry, Nicholas. You could have been great, but you chose the wrong side. The world went dark. When I woke, I was back in my quarters. Morning light streamed through the windows. My head ached, a deep, throbbing pain that made it hard to think. I could not remember the previous night, could not remember going to bed. The last clear memory I had was dinner with some of the wizard's courtiers, drinking wine, laughing at jokes I could not recall. There was a note on my bedside table. In Glinda's handwriting, it said, "Thank you for your visit. The wizard was most impressed with your insights. He hopes you will return to the East and continue your good work there. Safe travels." I left the Emerald City that afternoon, confused but assuming I had simply had too much to drink the night before. The journey home was uneventful. I returned to Eleanor's tower, reported that I had found nothing useful, that the wizard was too well protected and too careful to expose himself. She looked at me strangely when I said that. She asked me about specific things I was supposed to have investigated. I could not remember them, could not remember why I had even gone to the Emerald City in the first place. The purpose of my mission had been wiped clean from my mind. Eleonora did not push, not then, but I saw the worry in her eyes, the fear. 3 days later, I had my first accident. I was in the forests near my childhood village, overseeing a timber harvest. Simple work, the kind of thing I had done 1,000 times before. I swung my axe at a marked tree, and the blade twisted in my grip. I felt it bite into my hand, felt the shocking cold of severed flesh and the hot rush of blood that followed. I had cut off my left index finger at the second knuckle. The pain was incredible, blinding, but beneath the pain was something else. A whisper in the back of my mind, a voice that said, "This is your fault. You were careless. You were not paying attention." Except I had been paying attention, and I knew I had. The axe had moved on its own, had twisted in a way no normal tool should be able to twist. But when I tried to explain that to the physicians who bandaged my hand, the words would not come. Instead, I heard myself saying, "I was careless. It was an accident." The physicians sent me to a tinsmith, a specialist who had recently arrived in the East from the Emerald City. He was recommended by Glinda herself, the letter said. The best artificer in Oz, capable of creating prosthetics so advanced they functioned almost like real flesh. The tinsmith's name was Kuklip. He was a small, nervous man with hands that never stopped moving. He examined my injury and told me he could replace the finger with a mechanical one. It would take a few days to craft, but it would work perfectly. Better than the original, even. I agreed. What choice did I have? The replacement finger was a masterpiece. Articulated joints, delicate gears, all covered in polished tin that gleamed like silver. Kuklip attached it to my hand using techniques I did not understand, methods that seemed to blend surgery and metalwork and something else. Something magical. The finger worked exactly as he promised. I could move it, feel with it, use it as naturally as I had used the one I had lost. But sometimes late at night, I swear I could hear it ticking. A tiny rhythmic sound like a clock counting down. 2 weeks later, I had another accident. The axe slipped again, this time taking 3 fingers from my right hand. Then a month after that, my left hand at the wrist. Each time the voice in my head told me it was my fault. Each time, Kuklip was there to provide a replacement. Eleonora begged me to stop going into the forests. She said something was wrong, that the accidents were not natural. She wanted to investigate the axe, to examine it for curses or enchantments, but I would not let her. I became angry when she suggested it, defensive in ways that made no sense. I told her I was just clumsy, that I needed to be more careful, that the replacements were working fine. I did not understand why I was saying these things. Did not understand why I could not accept her help. But the words came out of my mouth anyway, and I believed them even as part of me screamed that they were lies. The process accelerated, both arms gone at the shoulder, then my left leg at the hip, then my right leg. Each amputation was accompanied by the same story: an accident in the forest, my own carelessness, Ku-Klip's miraculous replacements, and with each piece of flesh that was taken, I felt pieces of my mind go with it. Memories fading like old photographs left in sunlight. Skills I had spent years mastering suddenly beyond my reach. The person I had been was being systematically erased, replaced with something simpler, something manageable, something safe. Eleonora tried to intervene. She came to me after I lost my second leg, confronted me in my rooms. She said, "This is not natural, Nick. Someone is doing this to you. Please, let me help. Let me break whatever curse they have placed on you." I looked at her, and for just a moment I saw through the fog. I remembered who I was, what I had discovered. I tried to speak, to tell her about the wizard, about the machine in the basement, about Glinda's betrayal. I opened my mouth, and the words were right there, desperate to escape. But they did not come out. Instead, a different voice spoke through me. Not my voice. Something else. Something that had been woven into the tin, into the replacements, growing stronger with each new piece. It said, "I do not need your help. I am fine. Please leave." Eleonora's face crumpled. I saw her heart break in that moment, saw her realize that she was losing me, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She left, and I was glad. The foreign presence in my head was glad. It did not want her interference. It had work to complete. The final transformation happened on a cold morning in autumn. I was in the forest again, though I could not remember why. My body was almost entirely tin by that point. Only my head and torso remained flesh. I raised the axe, and this time when it slipped, it cut clean through my chest. I should have died instantly. The blade severed my spine, cut through my heart, destroyed organs that no person can live without. But I did not die. The magic in the tin kept me conscious, kept me aware, even as I felt my human parts being removed, being replaced with more metal, more gears, more cold, ticking mechanisms. Ku-Klip worked for 3 days straight to complete the final reconstruction. When he was done, I was entirely tin. Head to toe, every piece of me was metal. And in the center of my chest, where my heart had been, there was only an empty cavity. A hollow space that echoed when I moved. The tinsmith stepped back and examined his work. He looked exhausted, haunted. He said, "I am sorry. She made me do it. She said if I refused, she would kill my family. I am so sorry." I did not understand what he meant. Did not understand why he was apologizing. I felt fine. Better than fine. The pain was gone. The confusion was gone. Everything was clear and simple now. I was the Tin Woodman. I had lost my heart in a tragic series of accidents. I was traveling to see the wizard, to ask him for a new heart so that I could feel again. That was my story. That was my truth. I believed it completely. The years that followed were a blur. I remember walking, endless walking. I remember chopping wood, maintaining forest paths, helping travelers. I remember rusting in the rain, the panic of immobility, the relief when someone found me and oiled my joints. But there were gaps, long stretches where I could not account for my time. Places I found myself without memory of traveling there. And sometimes in those moments of silence between thoughts, I would feel something. A ghost of an emotion, a fragment of a memory that did not fit the story I had been told. I would see Eleonora in my mind, not as the Wicked Witch, but as something else. Someone I had known, someone I had cared for. I would see the Emerald City and feel that burning hatred again. I would look at my hands and wonder why they felt wrong, why the tin seemed like a prison rather than a replacement. But these moments never lasted. The fog would close in again, and I would forget. I would return to my simple existence, my simple story, my simple truth. 20 years of wandering, 20 years of being empty, 20 years of being exactly what they wanted me to be. A tool, a weapon without will, a man who knew too much, transformed into a creature who knew nothing at all. Until Dorothy, until the house fell and crushed Eleonora beneath it. Until the yellow road and the strange companions and the journey to the Emerald City that I had made 100 times before, but this time felt different, felt important, until the moment when Eleonora was freed and spoke my name, my real name, not Tin Man, not Woodman, Nick. And with that name came a crack in the dam that had been holding back my memories. A hairline fracture that slowly, painfully began to spread. I started to remember in fragments, pieces of my past life surfacing like debris from a shipwreck. I remembered Eleonora's tower. I remembered negotiating with Locusta, the satisfaction of outmaneuvering her. I remembered late nights studying magical theory, trying to understand the systems that kept Oz functioning. I remembered the wizard's basement, the machine, the thing in the glass sphere feeding on stolen magic. I remembered Glinda's face as she told me I was going to be erased, and I remembered the one thing they had tried hardest to make me forget. The thing that had made me dangerous enough to destroy. I knew what the wizard truly was. I knew he was killing Oz, and I knew Glinda was helping him do it. The full restoration of my memories came when we destroyed the wizard. When Eleonora and her sister combined their magic to shatter his machine, to send him back to the empty void he had crawled from. The moment his presence left Oz, the moment his influence was severed, the final barriers in my mind collapsed. I remembered everything. Every moment of the 6 years before my transformation, every detail of my investigation, every second of the 2 weeks I spent in the Emerald City, including the night I discovered the truth, and Glinda wiped my memory. And I remembered what they did to me after, the calculated cruelty of it, the precision, each accident carefully orchestrated, each replacement carefully enchanted, the slow, methodical destruction of everything I was, done in a way that made it seem natural, that prevented anyone from interfering, that transformed me from a threat into a tool. They did not just take my body. They took my mind, my memories, my sense of self. They hollowed me out and filled the empty space with lies, and I believed those lies so completely that I defended them even when the truth was staring me in the face. The rage I felt when those memories returned was unlike anything I had experienced before. It was not the simple, clean anger of someone who has been wronged. It was something deeper, something that had been building for 20 years beneath layers of manufactured forgetting. It was the rage of a man who had lost 2 decades of his life, who had been turned into a puppet and made to dance for the amusement of his torturers. But beneath the rage was something else, something worse. Grief, because I had not just lost 20 years, I had lost the person I had been, the brilliant young advisor who could negotiate treaties and solve impossible problems. The man who Eleonora had trusted with her deepest secrets. That person was gone. The transformation had not just changed my body, it had changed my mind in ways that could not be reversed. I could remember what I had known, but I could not recreate it. The intuitive understanding of magical theory, the ability to see patterns and connections, the sheer cognitive horsepower that had made me valuable, it was all diminished, dulled. The tin had not just replaced my flesh, it had replaced the neural pathways, the brain structures, the biological substrate that thought itself emerged from. What remained was a copy of a copy, degraded and incomplete. Eleonora found me 3 days after the wizard's defeat. I was sitting in the ruins of his throne room, staring at the wreckage of the machine that had been feeding on Oz for 60 years. She approached slowly, carefully, like someone approaching a wounded animal. She said, "Nick, do you remember now? Do you remember everything?" I looked at my hands, at the tin that covered them, at the joints and gears that had replaced bone and muscle. I said, "I remember enough." "I tried to save you," she said, and her voice broke. "I tried so many times, but every time I got close, Glinda would interfere. She would accelerate the process, force another accident, take another piece of you before I could stop it. And you would not let me help. Whatever she did to your mind, it made you push me away." "I know," I said. "I remember that too." She knelt beside me, took my metal hands in her stone ones. We were both monsters now, I thought. Both transformed into something other than what we had been. Both shaped by the cruelty of those who claimed to be good. She said, "I loved you. I still love you. Even after everything that has happened, even after everything we have both become, that has not changed." I looked at her, at the woman who had given me purpose and direction and hope for 6 beautiful years before it all fell apart. I wanted to tell her I loved her too, that I had loved her then and I loved her now. But I could not, because the space in my chest where my heart should have been was still empty, still hollow, and I did not know if what I felt was real or just an echo of what I used to feel, a memory of an emotion rather than the emotion itself. I said, "I do not know if I can still love. I do not know what I am anymore." She smiled, sad and understanding. She said, "Then we will figure it out together. We will rebuild. You and me and everyone else who survived the wizard's feeding. We will create something new." And that is what we have done. It has been slow, painful work. We dismantled the wizard's machines and purified the Emerald City of his influence. We helped Oz begin the long process of healing from 6 decades of parasitic drain. We found others who had been transformed or damaged or controlled by the wizard and Glinda, and we did our best to restore what had been taken from them. The Scarecrow, Erasmus, he was one of the worst cases. His entire mind had been wiped and rewritten so many times that there was almost nothing left of the original. But with time and careful magic, we managed to restore fragments. Enough that he could remember who he had been, what he had known, why the wizard had targeted him. He had been the wizard's first advisor, the one who realized what the machine in the basement was truly doing. His punishment had been more severe than mine. They did not just hollow him out. They filled him with straw and lies and left him convinced he had never had a brain at all. The lion, Leonidas, his case was different but equally cruel. Glinda had not destroyed his courage. She had taken it from him and kept it, bottled it, used it to fuel her own magic. When we found her hidden sanctuary, we discovered dozens of such bottles. Courage, wisdom, compassion, creativity, all the best qualities of Oz's people, stolen and stored like wine in a cellar. We returned what we could, but some of the victims were long dead, and their stolen virtues had nowhere to go. As for me, I am still tin. That cannot be changed, and the flesh is gone, destroyed or discarded or perhaps stored somewhere in Glinda's collection alongside Leonidas's courage. Even if we could find it, even if we could somehow reattach it, 20 years of separation would have rotted it beyond use. But I have learned to accept what I am. I have learned that being hollow is not the same as being empty. The space in my chest, where my heart used to be, has filled with other things. Purpose, determination, the fierce, protective love I feel for Oz and for the people working to heal it. And Eleonora. She was right that night. In the throne room, we are figuring it out together. Our relationship is not what it was before. It cannot be. Too much has changed, too much has been lost. But we have built something new, something that works for who we are now rather than who we used to be. I help her govern the East. I use what remains of my skills to solve problems, to negotiate agreements, to build systems that will protect Oz from future parasites. The work is harder than it used to be. My mind is not as sharp as it once was, but I persist. I adapt. I find ways to compensate. And sometimes late at night, when the work is done and I am alone, I go down into the earth. I burrow deep into the soil, down to where the bedrock meets the roots of Oz itself. And I listen to the heartbeat of the land, the slow, patient rhythm of a world that survived a great wound and is healing. That rhythm fills the empty space in my chest. It reminds me that I am not alone, that I am part of something larger than myself, that even hollow things can serve a purpose. I am Nicholas Chopper. I am the Tin Woodman. I am the man who knew too much and was taken apart to keep me silent. I am the man who lost 20 years to manufactured forgetting and systematic destruction. But I am also the man who remembered, the man who helped destroy the parasite that was killing Oz, the man who is working to ensure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else. They hollowed me out. They filled me with lies. They tried to make me forget. But I remembered. And in remembering, I found something they never expected. I found purpose. I found strength. I found that you do not need a heart to fight for what you love. You just need to remember why you started fighting in the first place. This is my story. The story of how a brilliant young advisor was systematically destroyed over the course of 20 years and rebuilt himself into something new, something harder, something that cannot be broken again. I am the Tin Woodman. I am hollow but not empty. I am damaged but not destroyed. I am a warning and a promise, a warning of what those in power will do to silence the truth, of how easily a person can be unmade, piece by piece, so slowly that no one notices until it is too late. And a promise that even the most complete destruction can be survived. That even when they take everything from you, your body, your mind, your memories, your very sense of self, you can still find a way back. You can still rebuild. You can still fight. The machine in the basement is destroyed now. The wizard is gone. Glinda is imprisoned, awaiting trial for 60 years of betrayal and cruelty. Oz is healing, but the work is not finished. It will never be finished. There will always be parasites looking for ways to feed. There will always be those who claim goodness while committing atrocities. There will always be people like me who discover the truth and become targets for knowing too much. So I remain vigilant. I watch. I remember. And when I see the signs of corruption beginning again, when I notice the patterns that indicate someone is feeding on Oz's magic, or manipulating its people, or erasing inconvenient truths, I act. Because I am hollow. And being hollow means there is space inside me for all the rage and grief and determination that others cannot carry. There is space for the memories of what was done to me and to countless others. There is space for the promise I made to myself when I finally remembered who I was. Never again. Never again will I let someone take a brilliant mind and reduce it to nothing. Never again will I stand by while people are systematically destroyed for knowing the truth. Never again will I forget. I am the Tin Woodman. I am the ghost in the machine. I am the one who survived what should have killed him and came back stronger for it. And I am watching. Always watching, ready to protect Oz from whatever threatens it next. Because you do not need a heart to love something. You do not need flesh to fight for it. You just need to remember why it matters. And I remember. I remember everything. This is my confession, my warning, my promise. I am hollow, but I am not empty. And I will never forget again.
And so we close the book on Nicholas Chopper's tale, the man who was hollow but not empty. 20 years stolen piece by piece, until nothing remained but tin and lies. If you enjoyed Nick's confession, please like and subscribe to stay notified, because more stories are waiting. The Scarecrow, Erasmus, whose brilliant mind was wiped to hide what he discovered. The Lion, Leonidas, whose courage Glinda bottled and kept. Or perhaps Dorothy herself, and the memories bleeding through her manufactured amnesia. Drop a comment and tell me whose story you want to hear next. Your support lets me keep bringing you these dark truths hidden beneath the fairy tales we thought we knew. Thank you for listening to The Ghost in the Machine. Until next time, dear dreamers, may your stories always reveal what was hidden beneath the surface. This is Sleepy Sorcerer Stories. Sleep well, and we'll see you in the next tale.